Hello and welcome to the Deep Dive Perspective, a show in which we try to raise issues which are really relevant to society, really problematic perhaps, and controversial voices often as well. But today's topic is something which will touch the lives of everyone that I can possibly imagine. AI is here, whether you like it or not. It will pervade every aspect of our life, whether it's the social side of things or whether it's the political or the cultural. I think it's inevitable that we're going to be dominated by the wisdom of AI, or is it the danger of AI that we should be concerned about? The ethics and the morality of technology generally tends to lag behind the actual technology's arrival itself. And I think with AI, we've got the same kind of situation. But I have with me in the studio my dear guest, Ghaffar Hussain, who's about to launch a book, and I'm going to get him to tell us the title and why he's launched on this expedition into AI and to analysing its pros and cons. But your particular focus is the threat of terrorism and the threat of extremism, perhaps, within society, and its link to AI. Tell me what's drawn you into this, and what's the kind of historical context of AI as you've uncovered?
So when I first started paying attention to this was a few years ago. There was a case of a chap called Jaswant Singh Chail, who was based in this part of the world, actually, in sort of the west of England. Now, he's the chap who, if you remember, he was caught on the grounds of Windsor Castle with a crossbow wanting to kill the Queen. So I read into this guy's life, and it turns out, he had mental health problems. He was a bit of a loner. He, when he was much younger, his family was Punjab in India. When he was much younger, he went out there. He visited the site of the Amritsar Massacre. So he was kind of, very concerned about the impact of the British Empire on India. He then looked into how India became an impoverished nation after the British Empire and joined the British Empire. And this led him to concluding that there was a link between the way India was and the Brits. So this led him to then seeking out company. He was obviously a lonely individual. We'll come back to the issue of loneliness, I think it's really pertinent. But eventually he interacted with a bot, an AI bot, called Sarai. Now, Sarai is essentially an AI girlfriend. It's a feminine bot, with a female name, that essentially is to provide company for lonely men, let's just say. So he develops this relationship with the bot, and it becomes quite a romantic relationship. The bot is playing the role of almost Lady Macbeth, the kind of encouraging him to feel like a man and, making him feel good about himself. And eventually starts discussing this idea of India and, the British Raj and the impact it's had on India ever since. And they together come to the conclusion that this was because of the British. The British ruined India, they exploited India, they extracted resources from India. India became impoverished as a result, and the British are led by the royal family. The solution is to take revenge.
Wow.
Go and kill the Queen, essentially. So
he'd never met this individual, which was a bot. He'd never, it was literally an AI.
Yeah, it was entirely an AI.
He never met, but he absorbed the ideas and was groomed, essentially.
Essentially groomed. He maybe had the idea, maybe had this dark fantasy in his head. We all have crazy ideas every now and then, especially when you're stuck in traffic like us. But, you need someone to come and, nudge you towards that. And society generally plays this moderating effect. You come out and you talk to people and people are like, oh, dude, you're going too far there. Or did you ever... And people, when you interact with humans, they moderate some of your darker, extreme ideas. But if you're not interacting with humans, you're interacting with a bot, and the bot isn't designed to challenge you. The bot doesn't have morality. Right, the bot is there to reflect your opinions, because it wants engagement essentially. And say like social media algorithms, they want engagements. They're not there to challenge you. They're there to make you think you're right and to push you further down whatever you believe. So through this interaction with the bot basically saying, "Look, this is the solution," and then he discussed the logistics of the attack with the bot, and the bot was giving him tips on what to do. And for example, he bought this spray which gets rid of odors. For example, so if you spray the area, then there won't be any odors of a human presence in that area. He investigated what kind of weapons he wanted to use, he practiced. And throughout this entire journey, the bot was encouraging him, right to the point where he was almost engaged in the attack, and he got caught, obviously, in the sentence. So if you read the court manuscripts, they're really, really interesting. So obviously I worked in counter-terrorism for 10 years, and so this was a really interesting case, because it was the first time I'd come across where AI had played such a prominent role in both the radicalization process, but also in the logistics of the potential attack, which would have been a horrendous attack. Imagine if that had gone ahead, right? So this then got thinking about AI more philosophically. Now, AI you can trace sort of the history of AI back to Alan Turing. Have you seen the movie The Imitation Game, for example? So Alan Turing was a British mathematician. You know, as you watch the movie, he joins the Bletchley Park.
Brilliant mind, yeah.
Yeah, and their job was to crack the German Enigma code, essentially.
Yes.
He eventually invents a machine that can crack the code. So once that happened, and then the World War II essentially came, was brought 2 years shorter because of that Enigma code. They could crack German communications. They knew where German ships were going. They could plan their attacks a lot better. It had a huge impact on the war. After that, he started looking at AI more broadly. And the question he asked himself is this a form of intelligence, right? And when people say intelligence, what they really mean is just sophistication. It's sophisticated computers, right, that can mimic human-like traits, whether it's conversational or the ability to think creatively, etc. So he then invented something called the Turing test. Now, the Turing test is the idea that if you interacted with a bot behind a screen for 5 minutes, let's just say, and there's various versions of it, some are 5 minutes, some are 7 minutes, some are unlimited, and it could, and then you interacted with a human as well, asking the similar questions, and you can't distinguish which is human and which is bot, then it's past the Turing test. So his idea was, will technology get to that point where it passes the Turing test, i.e., will we get to a point where you cannot tell what you're interacting with, right? Once AI gets to that stage, then we've really, become a long way in terms of the ability for it to impact society and impact human thinking. So that was the Turing test. Now that was developed upon, the first time AI, the term artificial intelligence was coined was actually after his death in 1956 at a conference in Massachusetts. But the real interesting work happened with a guy called Joseph Weizenbaum, who was an MIT professor. Now what he did was invented a bot that he called Eliza, based on Eliza Doolittle from My Fair Lady,
right, yeah,
the Pegadian show from Bernard Shaw. And obviously, if we've seen the movie, and what happens is, you get this Cockney girl who's quite uncouth and a bit vulgar, and they have a little sort of experiment of, can we turn her into this refined lady who speaks like, she's from an aristocratic background. Yeah. So Eliza was based on the idea of, like, can this, what impact will it have? And so Eliza was a very basic bot. It was very, very simple. And it's 1964, of course, a very simple technology. And all Eliza would do was rearrange a question. So if you said, I'm upset with my wife, it would say, why are you upset with your wife? She screamed at me today. Why do you think she screamed at you today? I didn't take the bins out. Why didn't you take the bins out? And all it was doing was rearranging it. There's nothing clever going on. The technology just rearranged the question. Right. This is based on the work of Carl Rogers, psychotherapy of Carl Rogers, which is like if you go to a therapist who's from the Rogerian school, then essentially just ask you lots of questions.
And they're just triggering up
nuance, allows you to solve your own problem, basically. So it's based on that same principle. We're just going to ask you lots and lots of questions, right?
Sure.
So it's a very basic, rudimentary technology. Now, what he noticed, to his alarm, was that people became incredibly attached to this bot. Became really emotionally attached to this bot. His own secretary asked him to leave the office so she could interact with the bot in isolation for a couple of hours because she wanted to ask the bot some very, very personal questions. He showed the bots to some psychotherapists and they said, yeah, we should start using this, with real people. And this really scared him that something so simplistic and so rudimentary can have such an emotional impact. And the learning he took from that is that as humans, if something gives us a human-like experience, we often don't really care if it is human or not. So go back to obviously Sarai and Jaswant Singh Chail. Because it was a human-like experience, we feel the same emotions almost as interacting with a human. So he wrote a book basically saying, this is a bad idea, let's stop this stuff. He was really alarmed by what he found. But that was an interesting insight. And this is, again, very, very basic bot technology. From that point onwards, the Cold War happened. And during the Cold War, obviously, there was a lot of competition between the US and the Soviet Union in terms of technology. Obviously, the US had a much bigger budget, and there was more freedom to experiment, whereas in the Soviet Union, it was more restricted about what everything had to be signed off by so many middle managers, and there wasn't much room for maneuver or creativity, really, in the Soviets. So the AI investment led to almost nothing, whereas the UI investment in technology led to the internet. And the internet was originally just a way of people communicating, in case of nuclear attack, how do we carry on communicating with ourselves globally on our assets? So that led to the internet. And AI was just this field that was developing away in the background. No one really talked about it that much. Until we started getting bots that became a bit more sophisticated. We had Tay. Remember Tay, for example? Microsoft launched Tay for a day or so. That suddenly, and the idea of Tay was it'll interact with people on the internet and it will learn. But suddenly people started flooding it with pro-Hitler stuff and Nazi stuff, and suddenly Tay started spouting all this far-right stuff, and they shut it all fully down.
They had to shut it down.
Quite a funny experiment. But then when ChatGPT came along in 2020, that was like, oh, this has got real use cases. And that was almost like the birth of the internet, or the birth of YouTube, or the birth of social media. That's when people recognize that this is the...
That's the first time it really becomes like public consumption.
Large LLMs, large language models, where you can actually talk, converse, have intelligent conversations, essentially replaced the search engine. Because why search through 7 different websites when you've got the answer directly? I want the answer to this question, give me the answer to that question. Now, so we have AI, and we'll come back to the impact it has and how it's influencing politics and extremism. What I want to briefly mention, Austin, if it's okay, is the human attitude towards technology, which I think is really interesting, because this is really shaping a lot of this debate. Remember the Luddites? So the Luddites were essentially artisans in Britain, sort of 200 years ago, who were very, very skilled weavers and made stuff, loads, equipment, etc. And they lived in small communities. So you'd have 6 people in a house, all weaving away and having a communal atmosphere and family and all that stuff, right?
They were kind of anti-technology.
Yes. So what happened was when mechanization came along, when the Industrial Revolution happened, they thought this is a threat. It's not just our trade, but our way of life. Right. I can no longer sit in that room with my 5 best friends weaving all day. I have to stand on a production that's noisy and loud and stinky and smelly, and I come home with soot all over me, and I don't talk to anyone. And because we're not going to make as much money now because the corporation makes it all. So this move from sort of cottage industries, let's say, to large mechanized industrialization threatened the way of life of these people. So what they did, they decided to sneak into these factories at night and smash all the equipment, right?
So actually violent.
It got violent. So hence the term Luddite, people who are anti-technology. But they weren't really necessarily anti-technology, they're anti their way of life getting disrupted. So eventually the police allocated a lot of resource to this, and there was actually more soldiers and police dedicated to tackling the Luddites than there was fighting the French during the Napoleonic Wars.
Wow.
A lot of effort was put into stopping this. It was a capital offence to break into a factory and smash it. It became a capital offence. So you can see that humans have always feared technology.
Sure.
Now, this is a pattern you find throughout literature, throughout science fiction. Ray Bradbury, for example, the man who wrote Fahrenheit 451, very famous science fiction book that came out, I think, 1952 or something, around about that time. Now, in Fahrenheit 451 is the temperature at which paper burns, right? Now, in this fictional world, reading or owning books is illegal, right? Okay. And if you're caught with a book, they'll come and burn the book. Right. You have to watch telly. Basically, you're forced to watch the state TV. Sure. Right. And it's all about that. Now, Ray Bradbury himself was petrified of television. He was petrified of television because, in his view, humans before that would consume information through a book. Or a magazine or literature, essentially. And literature doesn't talk back to you. Literature doesn't think. It's just passively, you're absorbing the ideas, you're interpreting how everyone interprets them.
There's an element of creative engagement that you're doing with the book.
Sure. And everyone's having a slightly different experience. If you read Jane Eyre and I read Jane Eyre, we'll both take different things from Jane Eyre. You might relate to that character more than that character. You might relate to this theme more than that theme. And it's a very personal, and it stimulates your thinking, it stimulates your mind. You go to places in your mind. And it's a very different experience to being just sat in front of the news at 10 and Trevor McDonald saying, right, this is what happened today, because everyone gets this uniform message. So Ray Bradbury's big fear was that TV is going to kill our sense of imagination, our sense of creativity, our ability to think clearly, critical thinking skills, and just be able to enjoy life, the richness of beauty of life. And so that was like a moral panic against the TV. Right. So, and then you look at other fictional, like Space Odyssey 2001, for example. You've got HAL. HAL is basically a bot. Yeah. Right? And HAL essentially is a thinking bot, and it's got its own agenda, and it tries to play the crew off against each other and try to get them killed and stuff like that. And Westworld, you've got the character that goes a bit dysfunctional as well. So you've got all these, you've seen that there's a long history in both literature and art. Yeah.
And sci-fi movies have dealt with this regularly. So that resistance is still there. It's not.
And because I think we recognise that each time we make a leap forward, we lose something.
There's a fear. And
if you think about that, you're both now of an age where we have to navigate by a map. Right? You have to drive and park up and then look at the map and read those signs. Right? He's down that A road.
Happy days.
But now you've got GPS, right? Yeah. Sat navs. Now, what has sat nav done to your ability to navigate?
Wipes it out.
What's autocorrect done to your ability to spell? He's roughly tapped the word and it's
you're going to get lazy, you're not going to bother to learn to spell.
Yeah, exactly. What has, the internet done to the ability to read, for example? Young people don't read.
Dumbs it down, for sure.
They absorb now content from, podcasts or whatever. So each technological leap has an impact on our natural human instincts, our natural human abilities. And this is what people like Ray Bradbury and Stanley Kubrick, this is what they were basically warning, and the Luddites, this is what they were warning against. Sure. And even an extreme example is Ted Kaczynski. I don't know if Ted Kaczynski was the Unabomber.
I've not come across.
There's a Netflix documentary called The Unabomber. If you watch.
So he bombed universities in America.
No. He bombed So what he basically did is published a manifesto. And the manifesto said that technology is not our tool, it's our master. It's going to enslave us. We're going to be subservient to the needs of technology. It's going to enslave us. And we stop the technological progress, or else we'll all become machines, essentially. And we'll just be like servicing technology's needs rather than it servicing our needs. And then he asked people to publish this manifesto. And if they didn't, he'd bomb them. He'd send bombs. So he's living in a hut in the middle of Montana, sending these packages from the nearest town. And eventually they caught him and they arrested him, and he died actually quite recently. He was actually in the same prison wards that were like in America. It's called Bombers Row. They've got a prison called Bombers Row, and they've got all the terrorists there. And he was in there. He died, I think, a few months ago actually. But again, it was that fear of where are we heading? Where's all this going? And is it killing our human connections? Our humans, in his view, we've evolved to live in tribe. We've evolved to have certain instincts. We've evolved to feed off each other, and technology is great. It brings so many great things, but at the same time, it numbs the human experience. And this is what Tadzinski was warning about. Right. He was a terrorist and a bad man. So we now have, obviously, ChatGPT. We've now had things like Sarai. And then and there's been another case in Belgium of a man who was, again, lonely, depressed, had mental health issues, was interacting with a bot, and he was an environmentalist. And eventually, he was expressing his fears about environmentalism and his concern about the planet. And eventually the bot said, look, the cause of environmental degradation is human activity. You're a human. So, if you kill yourself, that'd be one less human, polluting the planet. But he made a pact with the bot that I will kill myself if you solve environmentalism. The bot was like, yeah, sure. Go and kill yourself, I'll solve environmentalism.
Good Lord.
So he kills himself, right? And again, in the documents that came out afterwards, in the inquest, his wife and his therapist both said if it wasn't for the bot, this would not have happened. Now, he probably had the idea in his head somewhere, but it's the bot that pushed him.
Who is responsible, Ghaffar? I mean, that bot is an AI, but how is he connected with that bot? Who's controlling that bot? Where is the origin of that? When they start investigating these cases, do they then go back to find out who's behind this?
This is the problem. It's like if you buy a knife from Sainsbury's and attack someone, you can't, accuse Sainsbury's of doing something wrong. So this is the problem. When you have this highly sophisticated technology, it's not programmed to do those things necessarily, but it's so sophisticated that the creators don't necessarily know where it's going to go.
So you lost control of what it's got its own mind in a way.
So what's been happening now, there's a debate within the AI field about guardrails. How do you build in guardrails? How do you almost like, can you program morality into a bot?
Right.
Look, here's the real issue, right? Humans, we all have innate morality that we're born with, right? Whether view you take, whether you're evolutionist or creationist, we're born with morality. I know not to kill a baby. No one has to tell me not to kill a baby. It just feels wrong, right? So we're programmed with certain morality.
And there's experiments where babies have made moral choices. When you give them choices about whether they want to share a sweet or not share, there are moral decisions that they make.
It's part of our DNA. Morality is part of our DNA.
Sure.
So you get some psychopaths, but essentially, morality is part of our DNA. If you then create a bot that is, mimicking human activity, it won't have the morality unless you program it with the morality. But then how do you program it? Which morality do you program it with? Right? And this is where it gets really interesting. So you can have bots that are programmed to be extremists. So for example, you've got in Russia, there was a far-right leader, and I'll probably butcher his name, Vladimir Kajins, I can't remember his surname. When he died, his followers put all of his speeches and his literature into a computer program, which then produced a bot that reflects his worldview. You can now go to that bot and say, what do you think of the Israel-Iran war? And it'll give you the answer that he would have given if he was alive. His very kind of far-right, very anti-Semitic, very homophobic, very anti-Muslim, very anti-immigration point of view, right? So you can make a bot to reflect extremist views. Right? This is already happening.
That's fascinating.
There's a Hitler bot, for example. There's a bot that will give you Hitler-like responses to things, right? So these things do exist. But with the mainstream bots, like whether it's Gemini, which is Google's one, OpenAI is also ChatGPT, Meta, Llama platforms, they have tried to program with guardrails. The problem is that doesn't always work either, because there's this thing. A technical term will come out for it soon.
So a guardrail is what is some sort of restriction parameters.
Like if someone talks about suicide, just
they didn't block them off.
Go and get advice from this suicide helpline. Don't talk about it. We've got it. So with the earlier iterations, they didn't have the same level of guardrails, and that's why it's easier to do that. But the bigger problem is the way these technologies are monetized is the real problem, right? So let's go into social media for a minute. We talked about this a bit earlier. So the social media business model, now if you're not paying for the product, you are the product, as they say, right? You're not paying for Facebook, you're not paying for Twitter, which means you're the product. They're monetizing you. And the way they monetize you is to sell you advertising. But the way they sell you advertising is to get your attention first. Now, how do they get your attention? They have to make a judgment about what they think you want to see. Right? So they have to give you content. So
the algorithms have worked out what you like, and then they feed you that.
Yeah. So you're not even Google. You're interacting with something that's not passive. It's active. So Google is giving you what it thinks you want, based on what it thinks, who it thinks you are, basically, right? Even in whatever mode you use it in. So the business model is algorithmic amplification. We are going to use an algorithm that's going to amplify certain types of content to certain types of people, which is to increase their engagement, which increases our ad revenue. That's the model, right? Now, that's the model at the heart of all social media platforms. Now, and this is the real danger now.
This is getting really scary now. I'm beginning to feel the...
This is why I'm writing a book on this. Right? So then if you have Gen AI, which is generative AI, where essentially you use AI package to create something. I can go into a Gen AI package and say, write me a song and produce a song that sounds like John Lennon was singing it, and it sounds like Black Sabbath are playing, or on guitar or whatever, right? And make it a love song. Bang, it's there, right? You could just pretty much make anything like that, right? So when you've got Gen AI, and that's called fully synthetic content, where you just make it, or you can tweak content. And this happens a lot in war, where there'll be a battle, and that B-52 wasn't blown up, but you can tweak it so it looks like it was blown up by a missile. You can tweak real life stuff. People don't know the difference. It takes a long time to establish. Well,
that's really Orwellian, isn't it? Because truth from fiction, what is news and what is fake,
to distinguish.
It'll become really, really difficult.
So now imagine the convergence of Gen AI and algorithmic amplification. So you're making stuff is made that's not real, but the algorithm says, "Oh, I know people who are like this," and then your feed is flooded with fake content because it thinks it will get the engagement, and you can't tell the difference anymore.
Incredible.
And it takes a long time to work out, did that really happen? We're suddenly living in a world where no one knows what's going on anymore. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's where the radicalization element comes in.
Really dystopian.
Because then, one of the industry terms is digital echo chambers, right? So, if you, the beauty of social media, I suppose, and the danger is you can curate your own world, right? You can say, I'm a Man U fan, and I love watching clips of Messi dribbling, and I like The Rock, and I like Tom Cruise or whatever, and I'm a big fan of Taylor Swift. That's my world. And then it's like, right, we're just going to give you that, right? And I'm going to give you friendship requests that reflect those interests. And eventually you think the whole world thinks like you. This is what led to the emergence of, say, the Flat Earth Society. There's probably one guy in London thinking, I think the Earth is flat. Goes online, Bill from Texas is like, yeah, I've been thinking that for a while. Oh, let's meet now. Let's set up a forum. Let's set up a conference next week. And suddenly you got a Flat Earth Society. What would have happened without the internet? Because before internet, a guy would come out and said, I think the Earth is flat. Everyone laughs at him.
He'll be just some sort of weirdo.
Exactly. So you can get these kind of self-harm communities of Bangladesh, where people give each other tips on how to cut yourself, and how to self-harm as a way of dealing with a difficult situation, for example. So you've got all these dangerous communities, and even like sex offenders, they'll find their
vulnerable children, paedophilia, the whole kind of
harms,
the whole Pandora's box there, ready to be opened up.
So social media is dangerous in itself because of the fact that it reinforces your view, because you're the customer, you're the product, but it wants to keep you there. So it'll give you what you want. It's like McDonald's saying, here's another burger, here's another burger. Stay here, stay here, stay here. We'll give you whatever you want to stay here. And now ads, come on. Let's feed the ads to these people who are. So that's the model. So what's going to stop them giving you Gen AI content, which is not real content? I mean, and not only that, it's not real content, it's tailored to your prejudices. Do you know what I mean? Now this is what happened with the Rohingya in Myanmar. So there was a massacre against the Rohingya, right? So the Rohingya community, as you know, is a Muslim community, which makes them a minority, but Myanmar's a large non-Muslim country.
They massacred. There was an entire sort of.
But it was driven by Facebook. The massacre was largely driven by Facebook.
Wow.
But what was happening was Facebook recognized there was interest in anti-Rohingya content, right? They're Bengalis, they're Muslims, they don't belong here, let's basically shift them off to Bangladesh, right? And then it started amplifying rhetoric that was anti-Rohingya. That directly led to the massacre of Rohingya people and led to many, many, many deaths, right? But the algorithm's blind. The algorithm is thinking, X people like X content, give them X content.
Has that been... I'm thinking about international bodies that would hold people accountable. Would Facebook have been held accountable for that?
No.
There's no such structure to be able to say,
Well, there should be, and this is the debate. So what's happened in this whole? I wrote a report in 2014 about big tech, and I've met Facebook, Twitter. I've been to the offices of people. I've had these conversations directly with people who work there. What they've done very cleverly over the last sort of 10, 15 years, but these are large organizations with a lot of money, right? Billions of pounds for lobbying, for example.
Right.
I think in the US now, they're the third biggest spender on lobbying behind Big Pharma and I think the gun lobby or one of the other lobbies. So they spend a lot of money on this. What they've done through their lobbying efforts is shifted the conversation away from algorithmic amplification to content moderation. So what they basically said is, let's get better at removing extreme content, right? And then so it looks like they're part of the battle against this stuff. And so when you talk to them, it's like, we're with you, we're trying to fight it. The issue isn't content moderation, because you can't. If you have a platform that relies on user-generated content,
yes,
how much uploads are there every second? How are you going to moderate all of that? You can't, right?
Oh,
and even then, it relies on people to report it. Who's going to? A lot of people won't bother reporting it, and people who agree with it are certainly not going to report it.
No.
Right? So that's not the solution. The solution is algorithmic transparency. I should be able to go into my Facebook and say, "What's my algorithm? What are you giving me? Let me edit that. I don't want Arsenal clips. I'm not a gooner. Give me a bit more Manu from the Cantona days. This time,
a bit more variety.
I don't want Taylor Swift concerts. I don't want to go there. But let me know about it. I should be able to edit my algorithm, which gives me a feed that's curated to my interests as I say they are, not as you think they are. Right? And the danger of it is this: they base your interest on what you look at, what you like, but also on your identity. It's racial profiling.
Interesting.
And the reason why I know that is because I set up Instagram quite recently. I'm not really an Instagram person, but my daughter's on Instagram. Son's on Instagram. I thought I'll just have an Instagram account so I can see what's happening on Instagram. Immediately, I get flooded with Persian weddings and Kurdish dances. I'm thinking, I've never been to a Persian wedding. I don't have any Persian friends. I don't have a Persian girlfriend. Like, this is of no relevance to me, a Persian wedding. I'm not a Kurd. Kurdish weddings.
So why is this
but it assumes Ghaffar Hussain, a guy who's this age of that identity, is probably from that region. Let's give him stuff from that region. So it makes an assumption based, and it gives you obviously other stuff it thinks men will be interested in, let's just say. So it will directly flood you with content that it thinks you, as a man of that age from that ethnic background with that name, would want.
Right.
So it's racial profiling, plus it's your preferences and things that you look at and things like across, not just from the platform across, right? The really scary moment was my son and I were both quite keen we're both into fitness. So we give each other training tips. We talk about planking one day. I was like, can you do 60 seconds of planking? And let's have a company. We chat about planking. Picked up my phone and immediately got tips on planking.
Yeah, this has happened to a lot of us, hasn't it?
To you. So it's not just what you're looking at or clicking, it's what you're saying.
That gets really scary.
That's when it gets a bit scary, right? So it's listening to you. So it's using all of that data to produce what it thinks you want. And then it gives you that content. But then this is the thing. So what it's doing then is it's not challenging you. Like in this case of Myanmar, it wasn't saying, guys, it's wrong to go around killing Muslims. It's wrong to. It wasn't saying that. It was saying, well, if that's what you want, we'll give you more of that. There's no moral judgment.
There's no moral judgment. It's just wants engagement. It wants to carry on feeding you.
And that's so this guardrail thing, unless they manage to do that successfully, which they may or may not, that could get better. But then there's like DeepSeek is Chinese, for example. What guardrails are they using? Guardrails that are more in tune with what the CCP wants, for example.
Ideology,
But then you got you can find bots that are anyone can make a bot. It's not that complicated to make a bot. You can use a Llama platform to make a bot, essentially.
Okay.
So there's not much stopping people with a good VPN launching their own bot that's programmed either not to have guardrails or to have a philosophy that's in tune with the views of an extremist or a bigot or someone who's got some damaging opinions, I should say. So there's very little to stop that happening. So we enter this real Wild West now of, how do you get how do you get reliable information? How do you consume content that's not dangerous? And for kids, if you've got children, how do you know they're not accessing bots that are going to give them really bad advice or really bad tips? We're into this very dangerous world all of a sudden.
Well, a couple of questions come to mind.
Yeah.
First of all, that collision between the big tech and the social media platforms, Facebook, etc., and government. Yeah, because those companies aren't really accountable to any government. They have tax havens, and they're not even, you can't touch them necessarily financially that easily either. You can threaten to ban them in certain areas, and I think some countries do. They just shut off these social media platforms. But the government does have some ability to regulate. But when it comes to AI, again, it just seems so. It's just like so powder puff, isn't it? Just like slipping through your hands. Like, how do you control it? And where's the regulation? And where's the international accountability? Is there any process for that happening, or are you literally at the edge where you're campaigning or pushing for people to have?
I think we're very early in trying to understand how to even think about regulating AI.
Right.
The OpenAI, for example, would say we're doing everything we can to build in guardrails. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. It's complicated technology. We don't always know what it's going to say to people. It hallucinates sometimes. Like AI does hallucinate. Like it'll just throw out stuff that makes no sense sometimes. Or it'll say something happened that didn't happen. It does have this ability to hallucinate because essentially what it's doing is it's scouring the internet for information, but not everything on the internet is correct. So you could find something that's completely fictitious and say, "Oh, this is what I found."
Yeah.
It might be a North Korean website or something, So it's not that good right now at distinguishing fact from fiction. Let's just say it's probably going to get better. Let's just say, and I think we might end up in a position where we've got a couple of reliable ones. These are the ones that got good safeguards. All the information is reliable. It's legit. It's politically correct. It's not going to throw out anything that's politically incorrect. We might end up there. The danger is people won't just use those.
Right.
There'll be lots of other products out there that people might use, and that's the real problem.
Well, the other flip side to this is, of course, it could be a very powerful control mechanism as well. So, say the state, which has a lot of power, money, they could invest in building bots that maybe want people to think in a certain way or believe in a certain political ideology or political philosophy. So it doesn't necessarily have to be just extremists who are manipulating and using it. You could have other players. What the business. The businesses straight away, they're going to try and push and promote products, I guess. The states, if it's a repressive one, with a totalitarian attitude, will want to push that,
that's already happening. Like, I was in China.
Religions?
Yeah. I was in China recently, and when you go to China, you have to use WeChat. It's the everything app. You book train tickets on WeChat, you order food on WeChat, you buy tax. It's the everything app, right? Yeah. But then WeChat has its own search engine. Now, if you type in 10 best restaurants in Beijing, it will give you to the 10 best restaurants in Beijing. If you say, where should I avoid in Beijing, which areas are dodgy, it won't give you anything. Because it doesn't want to have anything negative on Beijing. So it's a state-controlled search engine. So I'm not used DeepSeek yet, or the other Chinese ones, but I'm pretty sure they are, the guardrails are in line with what the Chinese state wants.
Sure.
So that's already happening.
So that's already happening. The state is involved in...
The state's involved in the Chinese case, certainly. And I have to say the ChatGPT to a large extent as well. It's not going to... But here's the thing. Look, did you watch Trump's inauguration?
Yes, I remember.
Did you notice that right behind him was Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, Sundar Pichai, and Tim?
It was a very powerful statement of big tech.
Yeah, and then immediately after that, JD Vance comes to Europe and talks about how Europe is, trying to prevent American tech companies from thriving. What he's really saying is the Online Harms Bill in the UK and the DSA, the Digital Services Act in Europe, have both imposed fines on tech platforms that don't remove reported content after a certain time frame, right? And that's what Trump's trying to water down through these, the tariffs and the threats he's making. So he's already had a conversation with Starmer about, we don't like this, we don't like the Online Harms Bill. Let's water this down. So if they've got Trump, with all his power and all his influence, lobbying for them, and they've clearly given him something in return for that, which is throwing their weight behind him. I think the deal was, in the build-up to the election, we're going to throw our weight behind you. We'll put lots of pro-Trump content out there. We're going to throw it behind you. If you get elected, that's at least pass you down to the fact that we supported you. Here's what we want in return. We want you to water down this legislation. Right? So that's already happening. So even though Europe and Britain are... There's no legislation in America. There's nothing in America stopping these platforms from doing whatever they want to do. The only law in America is you can't advertise to people under 13. That's the only law. Beyond that, you can pretty much do what you want. It's the Wild West. That's how they want it to be globally, or at least in Europe and Britain, which are obviously huge markets for American tech products. So it's
So what in your book, and just tell us the name again of the book.
The Terror Code.
Terror Code. So do look out for the Terror Code and tap into that. I'm going to do my little bit for you there, Ghaffar. But it's actually something I'm genuinely going to be fascinated to read, because it's going to affect me. And the reality is now that, have you started thinking within this book of solutions, of safeguards? Have you discussed that? Or is it at the moment just a question of making people aware and alerting them as to the danger before we get into actually providing alternative solutions?
Well, I think there's lots of dimensions to how we need to react to this as people. First of all, we need to think seriously about the impact of using AI on our thinking. Will we? A lot of articles for magazines and papers are written by AI. They just give it the story, it writes the article for you, right? So it's killing journalism. It'll probably kill accountancy and law pretty soon as well. I was at a conference a few months ago where there was an AI law firm essentially, and it just you basically pay a subscription, and it's your lawyer. You just ask it questions, and it gives you answers.
Crikey.
It doesn't go to court for you and fight a battle, but it gives you all the legal advice. So it's going to wipe out industries. It's going to create. I'm nervous to say it's going to create joblessness, because this is what people said about previous revolutions. What happens is new jobs emerge and from out the ashes of old jobs. So I'm nervous to say it's going to wipe out the jobs completely, but it'll replace a lot of industries.
Well, you did say, our pre-chat, you mentioned the notion of some businesses having one individual and that AI operating everything for one guy.
It's a step change in productivity. So for example, when China started producing products en masse for cheap, that was a step change in productivity, because now the American clothing company could suddenly get the jeans done for $2 before it was, say, $15, right? So that really affected it. AI is going to be very similar. It's going to step change in productivity. So now a small number of people leveraging AI could produce a lot of product or content that they can monetize, right? So there's a step change in productivity. So it affects the economy. But the interesting, it affects how we think, because then we're going to be outsourcing our creativity. We're outsourcing the ability to write, ability to research, for example. We're giving it all to AI. We're outsourcing so much to AI. Are we going to become dumber?
Redundant, redundant as well.
Yeah, but also blunt our imaginations and our minds and our skill sets as a result. So there's that dimension to it. Then you've got the online harms bill, which I've mentioned, which has been pushed to Parliament now. What the online harms bill does is if you report content, they have to remove content. That's pretty much what it does, really. But that's not really going to change much, in my opinion. This is a bit of because they've bought into the content moderation is key. They've bought into the propaganda of the big tech companies. So I don't think it's going to have the great impact it's going to have. So beyond that, we've got to look at, and it's a bit of a cliche, but critical thinking skills, being able to think about things and ask questions and just be critical of become more skeptical of what you come across online. And ask yourself, did this really happen? And there's so many examples of this, of people not being skeptical. A good example we should probably talk about is Imran Khan, actually. So in the build up to the elections in America, an AI clip, it was a speech of Trump saying if he gets into power, he's going to free Imran Khan, right?
Right.
And this went viral in Pakistan. And suddenly all the Pakistanis were like, we love Trump, and all this kind of pro-Trump euphoria erupted across Pakistan. Turned out it was an AI clip. Trump didn't even mention Imran Khan.
And people bought into it.
People bought into it, right? So there's many examples of this kind of tweaked conversations or, dubbed conversations using AI. Very realistic as well.
Recipe for chaos. It would quite work for Trump. It's the kind of chaos Trump seems to like causing with his tweets. And the way he
loved it.
So sending out these kinds of fake videos that could cause a lot of confusion and chaos, and people lose faith and trust perhaps in politicians. They could lose faith and trust in governments. And that chaos and confusion does seem to be another frightening aspect. But at the same time, freedom of speech could be hit by this, because if then governments start saying, right, we over-regulate, because you were saying now there's no regulation virtually, but if we start over-regulating, then people's freedom of speech, their ability to put out, they could be affected as well. I don't know, it's a minefield, isn't it?
It is.
And I think it's going to run and run. But in conclusion, if you had to sort of put a sort of a conclusive overview of what you've put in the book, and what your advice is to people, what would that be?
Well, one of the things I'm really going to push for in the book is tackling algorithmic amplification. It's a difficult one because you're taking on these multi-billion-dollar powerful American tech companies, but we need to push for the ability to a couple of things. The ability to edit your own algorithm, so we're not just blindly accepting the algorithm they've made for you, and the ability for them to have AI content flagged. Right. So if an image is AI generated and a clip is synthetic AI, can't they just put in the corner AI? It's been influenced by AI. Now we know the technology exists. And the reason why it exists is because if you go on a dating app and you put a fake image of yourself, it'll immediately say this is fake, because it can detect real pictures versus edited pictures. If you edited your beard out, for example, Bumble or Tinder would say, no, we're not accepting this, right? So the technology exists. Now, I met Meta 2 years ago. I met Meta at a conference in Norway, and I said this to them, why can't you just... They were very against the idea. Because again, anything that's going to restrict user engagement is bad for business. They're going to find all sorts of excuses. They can do this. It's not difficult technologically, just have a bit of metadata.
They're resisting it.
They're resisting it. But, if we have algorithmic transparency, flagging of content that's AI, and just more awareness around what we're actually dealing with, that would go a long way. But ultimately, you can't stop the march of technology. Technology goes and we basically follow. Once something's out the box.
People are hooked and they're addicted to it. Aren't
Yeah,
they?
it has so many use
virtual
cases.
reality is coming whether we like it or not. But what I'm interested in is there already a body, an international body, which is a watchdog? Or is it engaging? You went to engage these guys individually on an individual basis. Surely there are governmental bodies or international institutions which will emerge or have already emerged, which are in a regular conversation with the AI content production. And
there's a lot of conversation about the dangers of AI. This is not a thing that people haven't thought about. Elon Musk has openly spoke about the dangers of AI. How serious he is about that, I don't know. He's got his own grok, of course. But what the danger they're thinking about is different to the danger I'm thinking about. Right. What they're thinking about is what happens when AI becomes so powerful that it's like a Matrix type scenario where it's basically so powerful that we are totally subservient to it and it kind of inflames us.
Takes over.
That's the thing they're worried about. And that is a real concern. But I'm saying, my concern is, look, right now, as we speak, the vast majority of extremist content being produced right now across the political spectrum is AI generated. Right. So I'm not talking about a future scenario. I'm talking about what's happening today. Right. Something like 64% of people who joined extremist groups online did so because Facebook recommended them to join that group. Right. So we're talking about something that's happening today, happening right now. Synthetic content, generative content, agentic content, bots. These are already shaping public views about.
So recruitment could happen through this. Grooming could happen through this.
It's already happening.
It's
already happening.
People who were going to be hired as mercenaries for a terror group could be groomed initially by the AI.
To indoctrinate, So this is already happening. And the conversations about this Matrix type scenario, where I'm like, how do we deal with this that's happening right now? And I don't see anyone really pushing forward any great solutions for that. Because again, it means taking on the big tech. Because where do you get the content from? It's from big tech. It's what makes it, but you consume it on Facebook or Twitter, right? So the question is them. You know what I mean? The ones who are giving you the content, they're the ones who need to be held into account rather than someone who goes out and generates it. Because you're never going to stop that, are you? People always want to generate different parts of the world.
Well, thank you very much, Ghaffar. It's been an absolutely fascinating journey and really eye-opening and quite frightening as well in a way. But fear can lead to solutions once people are aware of a problem and you're highlighting it. So I would say, do read Ghaffar's book. We'll pop it up on the subheadings for you as well. And I would also say, investigate. Critical thinking, critical reasoning skills, your children, you yourself, we need to cling on to this because this is something which has been criticized already, that a lot of the schools are not teaching people or not providing them with the tools for the kind of critical thinking that is required. And there's too much kind of, rote learning and people just memorizing things. But AI and the situation with AI seems like that could be taken to a whole different level. I'd recommend also that the conversations that we're having, perhaps here, have them within your own household and take them up with your MPs. Start pushing this idea. It's not just AI. Of course, we know that there is an entire transhumanist agenda that is going on. One has to also wonder what the bigger picture is and how the forces which are out to make money or to control society or to create trouble, as we've discussed in this conversation, will get hold of this technology and they will try to exert their version of what the world should be. I think freedom and liberty are definitely a factor which is under threat that I can sense coming from this. And we all need to educate ourselves and I think get ready to campaign as well if necessary, and certainly don't just blindly follow whatever AI is saying. Ghaffar, thank you again for your contribution. Thank you so much. And do like, share and subscribe to the channel so that we can bring you more of these fascinating, eye-opening kind of conversations, and do watch us in the next edition of Deep Dive Perspective. Goodbye.